Hey guys, it's BlockchainBrad, and as always, it's freaking amazing to be with you in the blockchain space. Guys, today I want to talk about a really hot topic at the moment called Ontology. It's a trust network. It is absolutely freaking amazing, and I'm going to be spending most of my time talking about that. I am going to be talking about that for at length. So guys, if you haven't got a cuppa or a beer or some sort of thing to kick back and get into this, grab one now. But before we get started, I just wanted to quickly address two things. I haven't posted in a few days, and I'm really sorry about that. I've been flat out trying to do research. It's got nothing to do with the weekend drama with the riddle, but I will just mention that briefly because it's something that I personally submitted a statement from myself. Obviously, you guys, as I've said before, I do have investments in NEO, but I am much more interested in the research. I'm much more interested in blockchain as a whole. And it was probably because of the research that I started to put some of my own money into NEO. But in relation to the whole premise for NEO, it is actually designed to be a community-based ecosystem. And the kind of irony that we saw on the weekend, I guess, requires us to speak of that. But I will start with the explanation and just briefly say that with mistakes come, in terms of good leadership, come acknowledgement, and that's what we saw, and that's important for the future and viability of NEO. It's important for it to flourish, and I would like to acknowledge the NEO Council for their maturity in the way that they handled this, because it is important that they acknowledge that the people matter. In response, I just wanted to also be fair to the community, so I thought I'd show you a very generic sort of response to a few things, and one of them is simply showing you that there were counter arguments. There were some people who were very upset about it, and I won't be commenting on whether I agree or not. That's not professional, I don't think, but what is important is we acknowledge and respect all sides and all positions so that we can move forward as an ecosystem. So thank you for all the people who submitted their ideas to my Twitter. The next thing I wanted to talk about was an AMA that's coming up. Actually, before I do that, I'll just quickly show you this. This was from a post. I did promise this person I'd acknowledge them, from MRKSCTZ. And the reason why I wanted to post that was that this person went to a great deal of effort to assess the situation that happened on the weekend, and they were really succinct with each of the different points as to why they felt it's important to acknowledge and then move forward. So thank you very much for your post. I read it and I commented as well. Moving back here, guys, right now, literally as we speak, or not quite, in about an hour, I suspect, there's going to be a drop of information for everybody with regard to the AMA that happened on November the 20th. That is basically a process in which people can submit their questions and then the Ontology Network team can respond. That's a brilliant way to get a better understanding of what Ontology is and how it relates to NEO. So if you haven't checked out the NEO Reddit site, definitely go there because you'll be able to access all the answers very, very soon. Okay, so guys, the next thing I want to do is just quickly talk to you about the Twitter handle, Ontology Network. If you haven't been there, they've just started up recently and they're providing some really good information as to what Ontology Network is, and they're trying to source the best information from the internet that promotes it. And also, just to give you some reassurance with my own credibility, they are posting some of the things that I post as well, and that's important because obviously, as a researcher of blockchain, I want to make sure that I'm putting out correct information, and when it's verified by these sources, that means a lot. So thank you very much, Ontology Network. I really appreciate that. The next thing is to talk about is the actual website, and a lot of people are finding it really hard to find information. So if you want to go and find it, you go to ont.io. If you type that in, you'll get to this website. There's not a heap of information in there, but what is good is that you can join different groups, so you can join a Slack, a Telegram, you can join the Reddit group as well. There's all different modes that you can join in on, and I'm going to show you one that I use. But I also do post some things directly through on the Twitter, which I'll explain later. And guys, the next thing I wanted to show you was the white paper. Now, for anyone who's new to blockchain, every blockchain product, or every, I don't like to use the word cryptocurrency, it's going to be phased out in some ways as we come to understand more of the blockchain structure. But every product that's released at the moment tends to have a white paper. Not all, but the good ones do. And it's important that we read through this to understand exactly what the technology is, what the premise of it is, how it's going to work, is it viable, etc. The Ontology one is quite good, and I've read through it several times just to get a really good understanding of it. It's not a laborious read either. So if you want, you can see some good graphics. I'm going to be talking about these in a presentation. But again, if you want to go and check it out, go for it, guys, because the more knowledge we have, the more power we have to make good, solid investments in blockchain. And just as reference point, this is not financial advice, guys. This is actually just to provide research, information, updates, all free. Okay, so guys, the next thing I want to talk to you about is gold finance in China. That is a website that if you can't read the Chinese characters, that's what it means. And you can find some amazing information, and I'm going to have all of the links below for you as well. But essentially, again, this is another access point for you to get information on Ontology, to understand what it is, how it's affecting the Chinese blockchain market, and more importantly, whether or not it's going to, it's likely to have some sort of degree of adoption. And just on that point, it's probably really important I mentioned that there was some recent media coverage also of Ontology in terms of mass media, on mainstream media. And when you consider the vastness or the population of China, and you consider just how influential media is in a very digital world that is China, then Ontology, has had a significant degree of exposure just from that one showing. So it was very interesting. The next thing I want to talk to you about, again, and I'll scroll up to show you, is another article that was, and if you're not sure how to get there, the actual website is not called Gold Finance. It's called JINSE, JINSE.com. And then you'll find other articles related to that. And this is another one, and this explains a new generation of blockchain-based distributed trust network systems. So it goes into detail about exactly what Ontology stands for, and that's important, that title of trust and network. You'll see from my explanation, it's actually got nothing to do with a singular public blockchain. It's in fact so much more robust and so much more relevant to how NEO is going to flourish as well. So the next thing is we're going to get into some examples of how you can access direct communications with the on-chain network, with the Ontology network. So this is one, and you can go in, and this is the Slack group. You can see that Dan's there. Dan's someone you can go to, and he answers questions, or there's other people also that represent Ontology. And it's just a great way also to meet up with different people of like mind if they want to know more about blockchain. The other thing to mention also before I get stuck into the real crux of this discussion is some other meetups that are happening. On the 27th of November, there's going to be a meetup that's very important, and it's the Ontology Network launch and related to the NEO ecosystem. So, I'm going to provide you with information as much as I can of what I know, but obviously this is the very first week that Ontology has been released, which is super freaking exciting when you understand the scope and breadth of this. But as we get to know more and more about it, there'll be more information I'll release as much as I can. But I imagine this is a project that I'll be talking about for a very long time because, just wait and see. So guys, that's just information for you. The other thing is there's another location you can get this information from PR Leap, and I'll try and post more and more as I can, but these are the best sources of media I could find to give you best info. The other thing is, and I'll just briefly touch on this now because I'm an absolute fan of this. And guys, I have looked at this in a lot of detail throughout my podcasts and through my videos. And if you go back into YouTube and have a look, you'll see a lot of that talk. From the very beginning, when I first read the white paper, I was very interested in NEOX, and I didn't understand, and there's no way I really could have, because it wasn't all disclosed. Now Ontology's come to the fore. I understand on-chain and exactly how that works at the moment with the information I have, but NEOX was something that was not so much a question mark, but it didn't see how it could actually interrelate or be a cross-chain compatible facility. But now I understand it, and Ontology helps unpack the question. So if you want to know more about NEOX, you'll see here it's actually bifurcated into two parts. It's got a cross-chain assets structure, or cross-chain assets exchange agreement, and it's also got a cross-chain distributed transaction protocol. And that is really important, that second one, for what I'm about to tell you in relation to Ontology, because distribution is a massive part of Ontology as an overall framework. And just on that note, it's a bit daggy, but I was an exchange student many years ago to a country called Paraguay, and this here is actually a thing called Nyanduti, which means in Guarani spider web. And I thought about one way, I went around and had a look at all my kids' rooms to think about something that could explain it to you with. And this here, even though it's a bit wrecked, and I'm sorry, but the idea of it is this is all handmade, all done by hand by people, and it's a good representation, I think, of the power of people in the blockchain, because again, it's community driven. And the reason why I'm raising this is because that's what Ontology is. This is a web in the sense that it's a network of all kinds of projects, all kinds of blockchain, all kinds of protocols. And I'm going to explain exactly how that works in the scope of not just NEO, but the overall ecosystem. So NEOX, essentially, if you don't know, it's going to bridge the private consortium world of on-chain. And on-chain has a very unique structure inside it called DNA. And that protocol is the bedrock of on-chain. But it doesn't just stop there. What happens is on-chain's interests are actually in DNA itself, because they're going to on-sell DNA to enterprise in China. And they're not just going to do it in China, they're going to do it across the globe, wherever they can make business transactions and agreements and NEO contracts. But what is really, with contracts associated with the on-chain group, because it's led by a venture capital private enterprise. So that is absolutely amazing. But on the other side, you have NEO and the public blockchain. And so obviously, our interest would be in the financial gains. But this NEOX is going to bridge the two worlds of the private and the public. And Ontology is actually going to facilitate that, and I'm going to explain how. So the next thing is to talk about is actually through, again, if you want to go to the Twitter site, it's a brilliant way to access information. You just click on to the Twitter and you can go and connect with them. And you can get updates pretty rapidly. That's just another means of media. Now the next thing I want to talk to you about, actually I'll just plug this really quickly. I wasn't planning on talking about this today, but Loopring, some amazing news coming out right now. Loopring is actually has indirect links to Ontology, and I'll explain that once again later. It is essentially a decentralized exchange, but there are some really exciting news coming up with Binance. They're teaming up, and also there's a link between Ethereum and NEO, and you'll see that unfold. So just a quick tip, you're lucky you got that, because I'm going to be talking about that later in a different video. Also, with regard to some other media, if you want to check out Tyler Swope at ChicoCrypto, he has some talks about, he's been starting to talk about NEO a lot more, and he's been talking specifically about Ontology. There are very few people in the world even doing that, so good on you, mate. I respect some of your research, so well done. Okay, the other thing is, if you want to just get a quick taster, check out my post that I originally did on Ontology before the news broke out. That only happened because I was researching quite a bit and managed to find out a few things about Ontology. But what is important is we get stuck into the crux of it, and that's this. So guys, the Ontology Network is a network of trust. And as I said, this is going to be a bit of a long video. I'm going to try and shorten as much as I can, but there's a lot to get through. So, cup of time, let's go. So Ontology, trust. Why the hell is trust so important? Well, basically, guys, it's massive. And the reason is that without trust, and it's not just coming from me, this actually came from, and I can show you this, I can send you the link. There was a CEO of the Icon Foundation literally said the same thing on a video when he was speaking in an interview. And his words were, you cannot have an enterprise, a blockchain enterprise, that is going to work without a degree of trust. And this is exactly why this is important, because it provides a trust foundation, a means in which businesses can append to blockchain and have some sort of security and business peace of mind that their interests are protected, and that there's also verifications and there's identity structures in place for recognition. There's lots of things involved, but what is important with Ontology is it provides you with the network. So don't think of it like blockchain. Think of it like a fabric, like a system, literally like an ecosystem, but perhaps even bigger, because it's an overall overarching framework that houses many different functions, many different blockchains, many different protocols. So it has layers upon layers upon layers. And NEO is actually going to benefit because it can, its identity aspect is not going anywhere. It is staying in NEO. Everyone's worried about that, and that's not happening. But what is actually going to happen is that it's going to plug, it's going to have a direct conduit to the Ontology Trust Network, so that there's a security of identification plugged into the Ontology Network system. I hope that makes sense. So if you imagine it like this, imagine it like there's infinite number of PowerPoints that are all part of this amazing, robust network of trust. NEO can plug in with its power source into this network. But not only that, many different types of blockchain different ecosystems, different projects, old tech, new tech, that's right. I'm going to talk to you about that directly from Ontology as well. They can also plug in and have verifications, have distributed data. This is a massive ecosystem in its own, and and inside that there are literally massive ecosystems. So the potential for this is exponential, and it really took me a while to get my head around just how big this is. But honestly, when you start to understand it, the scope of NEO is only going to be comparable to the scope of this. So the imperatives are there for them to work together, because they provide NEO, it basically qualifies NEO for enterprise right across the globe, and it is absolutely freaking amazing. Okay, so here is a graphic that you can see. I just got this off white papers. It's really well backed research because it's coming directly from the source. But what I really want to talk to you about here, I won't go through everything, it's going to be too boring. But that graphic shows you the structure. So you can see there that there are many different aspects of the Ontology Trust Network, right from the distributed equity through to distributed contents, down to verifications of people, down to distributed community management, distributed community. Distributed is a really key word, and that's why NEOX is giving us the clue, because it has two aspects to NEOX. And the distribution aspect relates directly to ontology. I promise, well, I can't promise, but my research is telling me that distributed NEOX goes with ontology. So disclaimer, check that out. That is not 100% that one little aspect, but the rest is pretty good. It's pretty solid in terms of, we know that it's going to empower NEO. So if you look there, again, they've also used the analogy of a web structure or a network, and all those interlinks and all those cross lines, they basically imply all of the cross compatibility that is the network. So you've got things like cross device, cross compatibility in terms of cross dApps, cross platforms. You know, go and check it out. But it's really quite amazing just how the degree in which this is going to work with all different modes and functionalities within the blockchain and previous technologies. It's really, really massive. And they talk about families and ontology in terms of groups. So their main groups they reference here are your verification service providers. That's one chunk that they're focusing on. And then you've got application service providers, and then you've got communities. And that's one key criterion that it can't be overlooked. And that's why things like this ripple effect of the riddle happen, because communities are crucial to the viability and for the growth of the overall structure. And then there's trust to give us confidence that our investments are secure. So then you've got ontology as a trust network. Again, what it is, it's essentially a blockchain or a distributed ledger network. So it's not like stopped at the idea of a blockchain. And it combines things like distributed ID, data exchange, data collaboration, procedure controls, community attestation, which just means copyright verifications. It means that things are editable, which means you can alter things outside of the main blockchain, and various industry-specific modules. So together this builds the infrastructure for a peer-to-peer trust network, which is, this is what I was talking about before, cross-chain, cross-system, cross-industry, cross-application, and cross-device. Now, what does all that mean? Well, guys, I know that this could be really heavy and boring, but if you've got NEO, this is freaking massive, because it means that this has the capability to interact on every level, right from protocol, right across to the very to usership, and all the way through. It is on every level an interactive, compatible system. It's like I guess the nervous system of the body. It is all over the place. It is everywhere, and it's interactive, and it's going to provide access points, you know, all over it as a robust sort of modular structure. So then, if we go further on, it's exciting because it is decentralized by nature with trust inbuilt in it. It incorporates multiple trust types, and it has very important protocols. One of the key points is that its ledger level is based on the Go and the Golang protocols, and that's important because that synergizes with on-chain, which again, at a ledger level, it also does that. So there's a huge link there. But also things like the Ontology Trust Network is a protocol network built with multiple blockchains. So again, just reinforcing that idea that it's not one blockchain, but it's several different ones, and it's designed to support the use of all business types. So in order to meet the needs of different industries, the flexible design structure is modularized, pluggable, and easily expandable. Okay, now guys, this is freaking huge, because what that means is that Facebook and Microsoft can plug in, right? Once it's set up, you can plug into Ontology for Trust. Now, I have been tweeting this before, and I won't be disclosing, things that are not factual, but there is certainly evidence to suggest that there are communications happening between Linux Foundation, which is related to IBM and Hyperledger, and also Microsoft. I've also found evidence that there's interlinks between major consortiums like R3, and we know they've done their quarter work, the W3C, Consensus. There's many different major players in the private consortium group, and what I'm trying to explain is that with Ont, all of these major billion-dollar consortiums that are forming very solid, entities can plug in essentially to this network of trust. Now, whether or not they do that, that's the question mark. But the point is that it is possible. It is absolutely amazing. Okay, so the next thing to talk about here is that there are what they acknowledge as 3 pillars of trust. 1, 2, 3. The first one is the trust through technology, which is really important, which you can read about in the white paper. The next one's trust through legal systems, and that's important as well. So you're getting these layers of trust built in with different foci, and then you've got trust through community. And as I said, if we can't trust the system, it will not work. And so for us to be able to interact, be able to utilize a token, to be able to interact with it in a very functional real-world context in various industries, it has to have that degree of trust, and that's why they've really had a deep assessment of exactly how this is going to play out. Ontology Trust Network also has an architecture for distribution of trust. So essentially, it is the architecture itself. So if you want to strip everything down, say you've got this massive, massive castle mansion. When you strip all the other layers down, you have the foundations. You have that, that complex wooden structure. That's what this is. It is the bedrock of the overall framework of it, however you use the analogy. And a good Twitter friend of mine who is a brilliant researcher as well, his name is NM. If you haven't seen him on Twitter, get to know him. Bite Size Capital is his handle. He used the analogy of a roadmap, literally in terms of where you'd fit from car right through along the highway, toll roads, etc. And there's all these different processes in which you could acknowledge where each of the different aspects of Ontology's system sits. So, for example, his analogy was that in the scope of things, Ontology acts as a toll in terms, and I've used the term gateway, but it's a great way to think of it because it's a conduit. It's a point in which we pass through for permission, and that's essentially what what this is. This is a network of permission that allows us to access blockchain, but in a business way, so that things can be verified. And that's the only way that enterprise was ever going to say yes to the blockchain, and they can do this with Ontology. So I'll repeat that again so you can kind of get it in your head. This is the big tick for enterprise. It's the big tick for small enterprise. It's the big tick for small business. It is the big tick for anybody who wants to have security in place in an overall network. And they can do that with their own blockchains as well and their own projects. It's unlimited. But the vastness of this project is massive. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about, I guess, is the Ontology Network statement. So you can go and check out all of this. It's all on the white paper, but essentially their explanation is that Ontology is a blockchain distributed ledger technology. It's a protocol and application level, and Ontology focuses on connecting and mapping different identity services, and they're really big on that term. They're big on identity, and they're big on data distribution. So what they are actually trying to say is that they are trying to be the conduit, that they are trying to be the modality for connection. So they're trying to connect all the different services so that everybody can interact, and the best way I came up with to explain this is a government. It is a mode of governing the structure to oversee that people get the information from one point to another point. And essentially it's a bit like, to be honest, it's a bit like the neuron activity of the brain, in that it's literally constantly, in motion, it's constantly robust, it's constantly, interacting, and that's how this system is going to work. So hopefully one of these analogies help you, but the magnitude is, it's really significant, and I suppose that's why I'm excited about it, because it is absolutely massive. Okay, so the other thing is, this is a good graphic to explain exactly how it's going to work. Now, there are different layers in terms of, you've got your Ontology Network chains, and then you've got modules and protocols, applications, right through to people and scenarios. They are all massively important because they show you how this fabric is going to work in the real world, how all the different components are going to interoperate. And as they've explained, is that cross-compatibility is fundamental, because it means that there's a structure in place for a person to utilize this trust network in contexts like, for example, for accessing food. You could actually literally send messages through the network for that to happen. You could utilize bank services. And that is definitely happening, because right now R3 and Hyperledger, I read recently, are linking up. So the consortiums are getting more and more connected. And the reason why is because they are also wanting to trust a public blockchain. And because Ontology is essentially a public structure and NEO is its counterpart asset structure in the public domain, this is extremely beneficial for both of them, because on the one hand you have NEO as an asset-focused blockchain ecosystem that has three elements of identity, contracts, and assets. But then you also have Ontology, which is this broad network that's not saying only NEO. It's saying, NEO, jump on board. Come on, let's go. But then you can imagine it is going to go crazy. So I am pro NEO all the way, and that's why I'm really a big fan of Ontology. But imagine if this can be connected to something more. Imagine if this can be connected to NEO plus all the different blockchains that are going to be to function in the real world. Imagine this is a hyper connective. It is a really amazing structure. Okay, so if we want to talk about the next thing, what can Ontology do? Well, it addresses the most immediate problem in the current system, in that costs are currently used to verify trust are too high. So right now, if, for example, in the centralized model, it's a really expensive process to house trust, because you would know the server requisites of that, the data requirements, the oversight, the number of staff. That is a massive cost to these central organizations. But in this process, what's happening is all of that is going to be distributed. That's why distribution is so important, because from a business standpoint, they are going to lower their costs as they distribute. And trust is the only way they were ever going to do it. This is the trust gateway to make businesses very happy. And what is really exciting is that this can also not just link with NEO, it can link with on-chain. And on-chain is the private consortium link to all blockchain protocol based on DNA in China. Amazing. This is a way for trust to happen. Now, Ontology Trust ecosystem at Ontology's network foundation is a fully centralized ledger system that includes smart contracts and security protocols. Ontology Network provides compatibility support for complex technological systems, whether that be existing blockchains or traditional information systems. Ontology also provides systems for secure data storage, hardware options for key management, and encrypted data analysis. Together, this creates an application platform that allows for all kinds of services to become decentralized. And by that, they're not saying that they're going to be the sole mechanism for decentralization, because they're already the structures of blockchain are decentralized. What they are doing is they are allowing for it to be a hyperconnective, a conduit for connections of a decentralized model. Now, this is really cool. This is absolutely freaking massive. Inside Ontology, there's a thing called the Ontaran Consensus Engine, and it's a wow factor because it is a highly effective version of what they call the DBFT, which is the protocol that is underpinning NEO, and it is a really good one because it's unforkable. And what is amazing about this is that it has reached near infinite scalability, and it requires a relatively low hashing rate, making it highly unlikely to experience forks of the network, which again relates to that unforkability propensity of in the way in which consensus is structured.